Scoreboard.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. I'm your host, Effie James. This podcast started with conversations about sports, but we've always believed that biggest stories aren't just happening on Friday nights or inside a gymnasium. They're happening every single day in our neighborhoods, our schools, our businesses, and even inside City Hall. Today, we're talking about something that affects every one of us, our city. Whether you've lived here your entire life, you're raising a family here, or you're just wondering what Mansfield will look like 10 years from now. Today's conversation matters. Today, as a matter of fact, starts our series on the great things happening in our fair city. I've been waiting a long time to start this series, just didn't know how to kick it off, but now I got the perfect guest. Now, leadership isn't just about making popular decisions. Sometimes it's about making difficult decisions that won't be appreciated until years later. Our guest today has been at the center of many of those decisions. She's led through economic development, downtown revitalization, public safety, and the everyday responsibilities of making a city move forward. Please help me welcome the mayor of the city of Mansfield, Miss Jodie Perry. Miss Perry, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Effie. It's a great pleasure.
I really appreciate it. This is awesome. I'm like, I don't even know how to feel right now having you here. So I think the best way to start is asking you about you. I think one of the early memories when I first met you, before you were mayor, when you were running for mayor, I remember thinking, first of all, is she a Republican or a Democrat? Because I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking that most people didn't know. Yeah. Because I felt like you were, like everybody was good with you and you were okay with everyone. So I think one of the questions I always want to know, tell us about who you are. A little bit about yourself.
Sure.
And outside of just being mayor, who's Jodie Perry?
Who's Jodie Perry? So I'm not from here. I always start with that because a lot of people assume that I am, understandably. But I grew up in Rochester, New York, in a suburb up there, and first came to Ohio to go to college. I went to Ashland University. So that's when I first started to get familiar with Mansfield. I studied political science, and after college, I went to Washington, D.C., because that's what a good political science major does, and worked there for a couple of years and decided, I'm not sure this is exactly where I want to spend my career. I love D.C., still love to visit it, but it's it was an interesting city to live in. Mm-hmm. So I came back, actually did campus ministry at Ashland University for a couple of years.
How about that?
And then I needed a paying job. And so I got hired at the chamber in Ashland and had no idea really what I was getting into at the time, but it ended up being a really good mixture of politics adjacent, a little bit of making the world a better place, and some business, obviously working with businesses, which my parents owned businesses growing up. So that felt very comfortable. So I did that in 4 different communities, moved here to Mansfield in 2014, and did not have running for mayor on my bingo card for sure. But in the process of being here and working in the city, with the city, I started to see I really love this community, but I think we can if the city does these few things, I think we can really move things forward more quickly. So, so that's kind of how I ended up making that decision. I tried to recruit people first, but I failed at that, but convinced myself. So,
well, and I think that's what I was going to ask you next. So I think of all the things that you could do to make the community better, why public service? Now, you talked about how, you had great ideas. Why do you think becoming mayor could be the way that you could make a positive impact on this community?
I think one of the things, there's 2 things that I think about. First is I was a member of the original Mansfield Rising crew. Back in 2018, went to South by Southwest and was part of the downtown revitalization plan. And during that process, I went to some seminars or some of the conference sessions, and they were with mayors. And that was probably the first time I realized how much a mayor can really influence and change in their town, even on big topics, things that the federal government was getting stuck on. Mayors were moving the needle on economic development, on transportation, on housing, things like that. And so I started to get interested in that. And then at that time, I also was working more closely with our previous mayor, Tim Faker, in my role as the chamber. And just over time, he and I developed a very good rapport. And he shared a lot with me about the city. And I had an interesting viewpoint, and it was that viewpoint that I think gave me the ability to see things that could be changed, and every organization is going to be different with a different leader. It doesn't matter who you are. And I thought, I think I can see things that could change. And as long as I felt like change could happen, then I was ready to roll up my sleeves.
Wow.
Now, there's a lot of change, so.
Sure. Now, I think it's interesting. I think what I'm going to do with this next question is kind of skip to the end because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to measure your success. Now, when you think about way down the line, when your term at some point comes to an end, and I kind of get the feeling, knowing your personality and knowing how you operate, that you're always going to be in some term of service. But when your term as mayor is over, what are you hoping that people say? I've always thought in leadership that, my wife and I have conversations about this all the time, that as a leader, when you leave your post, you want people to say, hey, no matter what happened, this was their legacy. They left this. This is something that I can hang my hat and say, hey, we had some ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we done this while I was here. What do you want people to say about your term, when you hang up your mayoral duties?
So that's a really good question. One of my guiding principles just as a person is I want to leave things better than I found it. And so for me, if that is the answer in, all of those areas, growth, economic development, infrastructure, public safety, then I'll feel like I did a good job.
Perfect.
And secondarily, this isn't a community impact, but I do hope that people see, even if they don't agree with me, that I worked at it with my whole heart right up until the end. I'm not a phone it in kind of person. Even as I was leaving the chamber, I worked extra days to just make sure I was leaving it in a good spot. And so, that's my plan. If I'm given 2 terms, 3 terms, or I end after one, is just to go after it just like it's day one.
I think that, and that's the perfect answer, by the way. But I think that when you think about this age of leadership, and certainly in politics, trying to be in a leadership role in politics is, of course, challenging and all of that. I guess I want to ask you, what keeps you going? And when there are, there's tough days, there are huge wins, and we're going to talk about, the great things going on. Obviously, that's why I asked you to come. The great things that are going on. But I'm interested to know, just from a leadership perspective, what kind of keeps you going when there are days that are like, man, this is tough. It seems like the noise sometimes can get huge for people in leadership positions like yourself. What keeps you going when the noise gets big and it seems like the things that you're doing so well kind of get swept under the rug? What keeps you going in those days?
That's a good question. So I talked a couple weeks ago to students or youth who were in the juvenile detention center, and they were asking questions about what's it like to be mayor. And I said, imagine having a job where literally everyone has an opinion on everything you do. And their eyes were like, oh my gosh. But I'm like, that's kind of that job. And so there's so many good days, and thankfully the good days outnumber the tough ones.
Sure.
But I would certainly be lying if I said there was no tough ones. Two things I guess I think of. One is I'm my faith. Obviously, you heard kind of in my background.
Sure.
Church is important to me, and just that worldview gives me a lot of comfort. But second, I think oftentimes when I have those days, I really try to stop and look in the rearview mirror at what has changed, because oftentimes it's people are uncomfortable with change. They're pushing back on things. They want things to change, but they don't want to change.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And so I can sometimes get frustrated, even without the noise, to just think, oh, is anything actually changing? But when you stop and look in reverse, a lot of times you see it much more clearly. And so sometimes I have to slow down and do that. Sometimes it's just calling a friend and saying, remind me why I'm doing this again.
That's awesome.
But I have to say, I'm very thankful, because I feel like God, every time that has happened, has given me a story. Someone will come up to me and say something, or an employee will say something, and that's what keeps me going, is those individual comments where people, you could tell they really mean it.
Oh, that's great. That is great. So downtown revitalization.
Yes.
Okay. I took a group of students downtown last week during our summer program, and we've done a downtown entrepreneurial walk, and we met some downtown entrepreneurs. We stopped by some local businesses, and we they were really nice to stop out and talk to. I had some people scheduled to talk, but then as we were walking, we had some business owners that were sitting by. The owner of Crow's Shoes just happened to be standing outside.
Yep, Jeff.
And he said, "What are you guys doing?" And I said, "Hey, I'm glad you're standing outside." And he stopped out and talked to our students. But there's a lot going on downtown, and I'm curious. What is the net gain for Mansfield for the whole project? When the project is done, what will be the net gain for the Mansfield community when that entire project is done? You'll be, as mayor, you'll be able to say, "See, Mansfield, this has happened because we invested the time, energy, effort, and resources into this project." What are you hoping the net gain is for downtown, the downtown revitalization project?
That's a great question. This project came out of Mansfield Rising, so it was already in action by the time I became mayor.
Yes,
but
it was.
I worked on it from the beginning in my other hat. So, I think so I talk a lot about my three priorities: growth, infrastructure, and safety. And I think downtown is one of those. This project is a rare one that touches all three. So at the end of it, we are going to see, we're already seeing, a $35 million announcement about downtown apartments being invested. Yeah. $10 million to reinvest in the hotel and redo the hotel, which is much needed. We can all agree.
Yes.
And I believe those are just the beginning. We're having other good conversations. When we talk infrastructure, the water mains that were running through there were put in the 20s. So, for perspective, women just had received the right to vote, and we're still drinking out of those water mains. So, they were busting. That needed replaced.
Yes.
That was just a time. And from a safety perspective, it felt like a super highway a lot of times with the one-way traffic. And so, both from newer lights that have better safety features to the two-way traffic, we do believe there's going to be a lot better safety. There's better lighting, all those things. Even physical safety, because if you remember, it's kind of hard now, but before we started, the sidewalks were cracked. There was weeds everywhere. Some of the curbs were gone, so we'd have flooding and all of that. And so, I think that this is a generational investment. And one of the neatest things about the downtown story to me is that when we started it with Mansfield Rising, I remember our city engineer, Bob Bianchi, saying, "Hey guys, I think if we really work hard, the city can probably invest about $3 million into this." And we were all like, "Wow, that's a lot of money."
It goes fast.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that of course was before inflation. But but at the end of the day, the project's $21 million. Yeah. but the city still has only invested about 4, which means the rest of it came from the state, the federal government, private sources. And that's just incredible because we approached the project not with what we can afford, but what we needed.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped transform my mindset to things. Like, as we talk about a pool, hopefully in the future,
Sure. It's
like, well, we don't want to just put in an above ground backyard pool, right? We need to build what we need, and the money, we'll find the money through other sources.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think that one of the things that I think, and again, we talked about decisions having to be made, and I know you kind of, as mayor, you were brought in the midst of that decision already being made to move forward with that. But I know that investments in things like a downtown project are a huge, kind of go big or not type of investment. I was telling one of our students, we were downtown at the carousel, and we were ending our trip with the carousel, and they were like, what is this? Like, what, and
why do we have a carousel?
Yeah, I was like, how did we get a carousel? And why is it still historic? And I can remember being young and thinking I was thinking like, man, I was in high school at the time when the carousel was being built. And I remember thinking there was nothing really downtown for me anyway.
Yeah.
There was nothing, downtown. So even though I probably didn't spend time at the carousel, I remember thinking like, this is something cool to say is in Mansfield.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
A positive thing.
So, it's interesting to see how to watch the downtown, especially watching it come alive and, and things like that is interesting to see. The other thing, Buc-ee's is coming to town.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna be honest with you. I had never. I think I had heard of Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
I think I've seen it in movies and things like that, but I had never really seen one. So I'm learning more about it since it's now coming in town. Now,
it's quite a place.
This is a huge win.
It's a big win.
It's a huge win for the city of Mansfield. Now, beyond the norm that comes with change, as we talked about, the normal challenges that come with change, tell us about how this not only can be a positive for Mansfield, but what can this Buc-ee's coming to our area mean for future economic development and possibly more businesses coming to this area, maybe wanting to invest in the Mansfield area?
Yep. Yeah, so this certainly, I've been in economic development for a long time now, and this deal has been really exciting to work on. And, the folks from Buc-ee's have been really great to work on, first of all, I'll say that. I've worked with a lot of developers over the years. Everyone is not created equal in that space, but they really have been very accommodating with things that we ask from them. Nice. I think the thing that, a lot of people, and to be fair, I was this way too. When they sent me an email and said, hey, we're looking at your area, I was like, I knew enough to be excited by that, right? Okay. But I had never been to one. I had no scope, and I was like, why do people get so excited about a gas station?
Right.
And I hear lots of people saying that. Sure. So I understand that. Well, in the process of this, I have visited now a couple Buc-ee's. And once you see it, you get it.
Right. Right.
Now, do I think everyone in Mansfield's going to be at Buc-ee's every day or every week? Probably not. Maybe for the inexpensive gas, but...
Right.
But they draw an incredible 5 million visitors a year.
Wow.
Are going to be, and so that stop, even if we take a small fraction of those and make them think, oh, there's a historic prison here, there's a ski resort, things like that, then I think, we've got a real opportunity. And the other thing that really excited me about Buc-ee's is they really punch above their weight class. So typically when we're talking about retail, it's, slightly lower paying jobs, not a lot of full-time jobs. Still good. I'm always excited, but 200 full-time jobs starting at $18 an hour. Wow. The bathroom attendants, I think, are $20 or $21 an hour. So, it will raise wages in general.
Sure.
not to mention the sales tax and the taxes going to the school and the taxes coming to the city. So it's a real shot in the arm for our area. And I do think, it's going to it's already putting us on a map of people saying, Buc-ee's is going there. What else should we be looking at?
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's immediately what the types of things that I think about when I see something like that is like, okay, an establishment like Buc-ee's wants to be in the North Central Ohio or the Mansfield business. That could lead to other things.
Yes.
So, I think it's a huge win for our community. And so when I ask you, like, what types of things do you hang your hat on?
Yeah, Buc-ee's is one of those.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
to me, that's one of the things that says, okay, Mayor Jodie Perry.
Yep.
I'm hanging my hat on that. But that's a huge win, and that is a credit to you and your staff and the people that have worked with you to bring that to life.
It was a good team effort with lots of people.
That is huge for our community. And I think once people see it and once people see the residuals from it, I think people will really be impressed by that. One of the things that I always am impressed when I see you, and I'm just going to say personally, anytime I've talked to you, anytime I've asked you in the space of education, you're a huge educational advocate. I know. So if I ask you, Mayor Perry, I need you to do this for Gear Up. I need you to do this for. Yep. You have always said, "I'm there. I'll do it." And it's amazing.
I love to do it.
And I only say that because I think I've had so many politicians, at all levels, above your level and below your level, tell me, oh, sure, and absolutely not. But you have always been one that has been an advocate for education, and you have always been there. So when I talk about the importance of education, that's a credit to you.
That means a lot.
When I talk about the importance of education in this area, and the youth in this area, when you think about the perspective of youth and their economic future and how we get youth, and this kind of ties into what I do, and I'm an advocate for post-secondary education, and what our commitment is trying to get our students to not only go and get a post-secondary education, whether that be a 2-year trade school or certificate, whatever it is, or a 4-year degree, we want them to come back to our community. How can we do better in bringing our students back? Because we have so many successful students that are like, man, they've achieved at the highest level.
Yes.
But it's so hard sometimes to get them to come back and bring that knowledge base back home. What do you think? What are some of the things we can do to bring those students back home?
It's a great question. I mean, I think a few things. So first of all, one of the things that I know holds people back, that I've talked to people that are like, hey, I grew up here, I want to come back, but I can't find a job. And it's not that there's not jobs here. It's just the jobs aren't suited to what they went and studied, and so I have long thought, man, there is just a mismatch here. And I think sometimes the jobs exist, but they, especially when you're talking professional jobs, everyone doesn't advertise them for some reason. They're just like word of mouth. And so if you don't, if your random message didn't get to this other person who may have a kid that has a great degree and would be great to come back, I think we miss things on that. And we're not the only ones. I've talked with other communities that see that. I think the other piece is, doing the community building that we're doing, right? I think I was not here during the Great Recession. I was in Rochester, but I know it really took a strong toll in this community, right? The city went into fiscal emergency. Hundreds of houses have had to be torn down. And so in some ways, I think the city as a whole, the whole area, has been rebuilding a lot of that social fabric since then. I think that, it's a community that's always willing to roll up its sleeves, which I love, it's part of the reason I fell in love with it. Was it reminds me a lot of where I grew up too, which was, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy,
right.
but we are going to fight to the death to protect what we have. And I love that. So I think it's, making sure we have housing available for them. I think it's, even the downtown project, if we want 20-year-olds to come back, they don't want to necessarily live in a house that was built for a family of 4. They might want to be in a downtown apartment. Right. So I think, we're getting those things, but we need to continue to push on them. And then really make sure, everywhere I go, I always say this, but we need to continue to talk more positively about the community. Which is why, when you asked me, I was like, yes, let's talk. Because, is this a perfect community? No. I've traveled all over the world yet to meet a perfect community. But that doesn't mean just because we have difficult things happening that we can't celebrate the good. Yeah. And I think a lot of times when I say things like that, people think, oh, she's just trying to, brush it over. And it's like, no, we have very serious issues. And I'm always willing to talk about those. But just because we have those doesn't mean we can't say, yay, Buc-ee's, or yay, this downtown project, or yay for this person that opened a business, or, because I think, if we wait till whenever the perfect moment is, it won't arrive. Communities are always changing, and so are people. So, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think the public sector needs to continue pushing that, and in the private sector as well. Like, we need to really work together because, it's Mansfield against the world, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think with that, and again, one of the things I think you do a great job of, and which can be so difficult, is listening to your constituents, and that can be really difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
So, what's your secret? How are you able and to listen to the everyday concerns of citizens and take those concerns into consideration into your everyday work without what can sometimes be vitriol in those concerns, and kind of just turning those off. How are you able to balance the real concerns of people and listening and taking that in without taking in the sometimes unfair
every small thing.
Every on small things. How are you able to balance those things?
It's a good question. I think that one of the things that when I decided to run, I promised myself was that I didn't want to become a leader that gets cut off from the community. I've seen, I've seen some very great examples of elected officials that don't do that and stayed in touch. And then we've all seen ones that do. They forget where they came from, so to speak, right? Yeah. And so at first it was like just absorbing everything. And after a while you realize, okay, I can't do that. I have to have the vision and drive towards the vision, but there's always feedback. There's always that two-way street. And so, first, if someone wants to meet with me, I go out, I'll call them back. That has been important. But I think the bigger thing is really determining when someone's dealing with you in good faith. Yeah. Like, you can be really mad at me and really hate something that I did, but I will still engage with you because I can tell you're engaging with good faith. Right. And there's others that don't. Sure. And, and that's where I have had to kind of figure some of that out. And, always explain to people, even when I can't fix their problem, sometimes they'll ask things that we can't do, or, just it's not something we can fix at the moment. But I think once we listen to them and understand their larger concern, that usually takes the heat down a notch, and you can have a good conversation.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's probably the best way to deal with that, and conversating and speaking in good faith. I like the way you put that, because that's the only way real communication happens. And I think one of the things I think is important that I think a lot of people don't think about is there are a lot of not just interesting, but some impactful things I think that are happening in Mansfield. You know, the company I work for, College Now, is based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and they came down and they took a tour. I brought them on a tour. We just took them around the city, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, these people are from Cleveland, Ohio.
Right.
They've seen everything.
How do we rate?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, here we go. So I took them around and I said, well, I'll show them. We'll show them the high school. We'll show them this or that. And I tell you, they were blown away by some of the you know what I mean? I showed them the high school. I showed them the football stadium. I showed them some things downtown, and they were just literally, you know, blown away by some of the things that they saw.
Yeah.
Namely the Shawshank.
Yeah,
like
sure, of
they
course.
had no idea.
That gets everyone.
Right, that gets everybody. But it's just sometimes you kind of get lulled to sleep by the fact that you're here every day.
Yes.
But what are some of the misconceptions about this city that you've seen that people have that really just either do exist or don't exist?
I think that people have this preconceived notion that Mansfield is not trying to grow. That we're not doing anything to grow, and so much of economic development happens long before any announcement is happening. You know, Buc-ee's, we dealt with them for 10 months before that became public.
Wow.
And so it takes, I think people misunderstand how long it takes things to get moving.
Yeah.
The Main Street project, 2019 we started that.
Wow.
It's going to finish in 2026.
Wow.
And, you know, so a lot of these things take a long time. Yeah. I think there's also a misconception, quite frankly, that Mansfield is not safe. Now, I'll be the first to say that obviously we've had some real tough struggles with that. But, you know, the statistics are showing crime is going down. And so, you know, I think a lot of the things that have been put in place is working, and that's helping. And it drives me nuts when I hear people just comment very offhanded about that. I also think, you know, a lot of times, at least this is something I've experienced, where people assume that what I'm putting on Facebook is the only thing I'm doing during the day. And I'm like, oh gosh, no. You know, my days are full and packed. And you know, my approach to Facebook is to try to tell people a little bit of what we're doing in a lot of areas. But there's a lot more work going on behind the scenes than anyone realizes. So yeah, I think, you know, there's definitely a mindset of, you know, I don't know if this place is really worth it, or is really making it. And again, very similar to how I grew up. Yeah. So I get that mindset. Right. But it's like, oh gosh, anytime, you know, we've had people in here. I mean, for Tina Fey and her husband, who've been doing stuff at the Renaissance, they're like recruiting more and more Hollywood and stage actors because they're all like, this place is amazing. You have this cool theater and we just get to do what we love. And, you know, it's like sometimes I think we do need to step back and remind ourselves the amazing stuff we have.
Absolutely.
And it's okay, even though it's not perfect, to appreciate the good stuff.
I wanted to give you a minute, and I know we talked about some things, and I know you're super busy. Again, I can't tell you how appreciative I am of you being here.
Yeah.
But I want to give you some time to talk about some of the great things, and I know, you know, we haven't talked about the skate park, and you know, tell us about some of the great things that are going on in Mansfield. From your perspective, what are some of the other great things that we may have missed here in the last few minutes? What are some of the other great things that we haven't talked about?
So definitely, I think just the parks in general has been that was a big focus point for me coming in. I heard loud and clear from the community during the campaign, hey, we need to do better. So, you know, being able to, you know, from everything from redoing Liberty and King Street to investing in places like Maple Lake and Prospect and Fox Glen, you know, we've got 21 parks, so it is a lot of parks.
Yeah.
So every park may not have had a major upgrade yet, but that has really been phenomenal. And I can't tell you how much I love visiting, especially, Liberty and King Street and places where we've redone the basketball courts.
Yeah.
Anytime I drive by, there's kids playing. And I just love that because that's the whole point. We want kids to be there. So there's more coming, though. We're definitely not done.
Nice.
Liberty, the bathhouse renovation will wrap up later this fall. We've got a grand opening for Middle Park, right by the high school, that we reopened, coming up. And that is really, that was closed the entire time I've been in town. And we were able to reopen it to pedestrian traffic, and it is the prettiest park in Mansfield. It's nice. And I think a lot of people either have not been in it or it's been a long time. So that's really exciting. We're continuing to do more and more with our infrastructure, replacing water mains, just making sure that the city is set for the future. And I really do think, economic development, we've talked about the highlights there. Hopefully soon we got the grant to tear down West Park Shopping Plaza. That's another project that I personally worked on. And, thanks to thanks to the generosity of Dan Nist and for him saying, yes, I'll buy that for you, for the city rather. That'll be torn down soon. And then we can start thinking about what does it become in the future. Lots of really good things. I believe, I hope, anyone who listens to this can walk away with one or two good things. And my challenge every time I talk on something is always, if you heard and learned something, I challenge you to tell someone else, because that's how we're going to get the word out is, people talking to people about the exciting things that they hear about.
That's the point. And, that's, to me, that is the big point, is to talk about the positives. You can spend forever complaining, and
we got work to do.
I've always been told that negativity screams, and the positive things are a whisper, but still, if you are looking for the positives, they are here, here in Mansfield, and that is just a fact. Now I'm going to end, but I want to give you some rapid fire questions here. All right, and this is just about you. Okay, this is you. This is not you. This is not Mayor Perry. This is Jodie Perry. All right, tell us your favorite restaurant in Mansfield. Oh, that puts you right on the spot.
I know that is a tough one, Effie. I think I would say Uncle John's.
Uncle John's?
I love Uncle John's.
All right. Are you a coffee or a tea drinker?
Both, but coffee more regularly.
Okay. All right. Now, your favorite place to relax in the city of Mansfield?
That is a good question. Well, I do like to go to the coffee shop called Relax. And maybe secondarily, I do like Middle Park, since we've reopened that. I've been enjoying going there for lunch and just experiencing it.
Good. All right. Last one. One word that describes the city of Mansfield.
Transforming.
Oh, nice. Man, I can't even trip you up. That was good. Good. Excellent job. Well, Mayor, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us today. I know your schedule is incredibly busy, but I appreciate you taking the time. And not just the time, your willingness to have the conversation. I've always appreciated that about you. It just seems like you never shy away from those types of things, and you're always willing to have these conversations and talk. And I always feel like in my experience, that's why I didn't hesitate to ask you, because all right, let's see if she'll actually say no to something I ask.
Not yet. But you're going to have to work harder.
I know, but you said
I appreciate the invite,
but
truthfully.
Again, I thank you so much for being here. Thank you a lot. And to my viewers, I will say this. Whether people agree with every decision or not, I think it's important that our community has opportunities to hear directly from its leaders, and that you've helped make things things like this possible today. Like, all I did was ask Mayor Perry to be here, and she's here. And I truly appreciate that. And as the projects continue to move forward and the new opportunities arise for the city, we'd love to have you back and continue with more conversations. And again, to everyone watching, I hope today's conversation gave you a better understanding of not only where our city is today, but where it's headed. So whether you're encouraged, challenged, or simply more informed, that's exactly why we have these conversations. And I'll be right back with my final thought. And again, thank you so much, Jodie Perry, for being here today.
Thanks, Effie.
Once again, I really want to thank Mayor Perry for being here. She was a really exciting guest, and she done an outstanding job. She did not have to, certainly didn't have to come today. She didn't have to answer questions, but she was willing to do so, and I so much appreciate her being willing to do that today. That was awesome. With that, my final thought today is about challenges. And, every city has them. Every city has challenges. Every city has critics, frankly. Every city has people who disagree on how things should be done. That's part of living in a democracy. What separates growing communities from declining ones isn't that everyone agrees. It's that enough people choose to stay involved or engaged in the process. Cities don't become better because one mayor has a great idea. They become better when business owners invest, or the volunteers show up every time, when neighbors get to know one another, when the regular or the ordinary people stop waiting for someone else to fix what's broken. Community isn't something we inherit. It's something that we build. One conversation, one decision, one act of service at a time. Whether you agree with every decision that's made by Mayor Perry or the council members or those that are in charge at City Hall or not, I hope today's conversation reminds us that the future of Mansfield isn't just in the hands of elected officials. It's in the hands of us all. Thank you so much for joining us in another episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. I am your host, Effie James, and remember, where the game ends, the conversation begins. I'll see you next time.